cows. 1.5 billion of them, spread across the planet, each with 4 stomachs. That's 6 billion stomachs. Methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that captures about 80 times more heat or contributes about 80 times as much to climate change as carbon dioxide does, at least in the short term. And cows emit anywhere from 250 to 500 liters of methane every day. Overall, livestock emit about 30% of all methane emissions worldwide, which is one factor that makes cows such a big part of the climate change equation. You've probably heard some variation on this before, but here's something I just learned a few weeks ago. Most of the methane doesn't come from. It comes from... That's right. Cows, with their 4 stomachs, burp out a lot more methane than they pass out the other end, about 20 times as much. And corn-fed cows burp out almost twice as much methane as grass-fed ones do. But a Swiss company called Zaluvida developed a product called Mootral, like neutral but with a moo instead of a Nooo, that kills off the bad bacteria in the stomachs of cows and other ruminants, which is what we call 4-stomached beasts like cows, goats, and sheep. By killing off the bad bacteria, Mootral makes the animals healthier and slashes the methane in their burps by about 30%. Can this new tool help to slow climate change?
Man may be unwittingly changing the world's climate through the waste products of his civilization.
There's a group of us now who are proposing that the Earth has actually entered a new epoch, and that is the Anthropocene.
We know that the enemy is carbon, and we know its ugly face. We should put a big fat price on it, and of course, add to that, drop the subsidies.
Earth. We broke it, we own it. And nothing is as it was. Not the trees, not the seas, not the forests, farms, or fields, and not the global economy that depends on all of these. But we can restore it, make it better, greener, more resilient, more sustainable. But how? Technology? Geoengineering? Are we doomed to live on a bionic planet, or is nature itself the answer? That's the question we address in every episode of Bionic Planet, a podcast of the Anthropocene, the new epoch defined by man's impact on Earth. And today we talk to the makers of Mootral, a new compound that slashes the amount of methane that cows burp out. We tell you how it works, what it costs, and we hear about the innovative financing mechanisms that its makers hope will spread it to farmers around the world. How do I pronounce your last name again?
Well, in French it's maîtresse, but in English it's maîtresse.
Maîtresse. Okay.
Maîtresse. Unlike Eminem, who's Mathers.
Oh, is it spelled the same?
Almost the same.
I first met Michael Mathras at the end of last year in Marrakesh, Morocco, for the year-end climate talks there. But we didn't get a chance to talk much. I caught up to him again at the Innovate for Climate conference in Barcelona, where we conducted this interview in the Mootral booth. I'll share that with you in a second, but first I wanted to thank 2 new patrons, PJ Connolly of Madison, Wisconsin, and Hannes Stefan of the UK. It's great to be appreciated, and if this keeps up, I might even be in the black soon. If you like what you hear and want to help, you can give me a good rating on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you access podcasts, or you can share Bionic Planet with friends. Or, the ultimate support, become a patron at bionic-planet.com. Once again, that's bionic-planet.com. I've set the patronage page up so that you can help per episode, but with a monthly cap. So, if you think $5 per month is good, you can pledge $1 per episode, but with a $5 cap. That way, if I don't manage to generate 5 episodes in a month, you're not paying for something you didn't get. And if I go nuts and deliver 20 episodes, you won't get whacked either. By the same token, you can offer $5 per episode, or 10, or 50, or whatever. I won't complain. I'm aiming to mostly do interview-based episodes right now, but But given the complexity of the material, I'll be interjecting occasionally to clarify certain concepts. It's a hybrid between a straight interview and a feature package, although I still think that deeply structured packages are the best way to tell complex stories. Unfortunately, they take a lot of time to construct and require the help of a good sound technician to do them right. Until I can afford that, I'm concentrating on generating these simpler, single-issue, single-guest podcasts. Now, back to the interview. Okay, and we're talking today with Michael Mathris, who started up a company called Mootral, which basically makes something akin to Beano for cows, right? Is that a good way to put it?
It's, well, that's another way to put it. But yeah, it's basically a natural feed supplement for the cows to help reduce their emissions, their methane emissions, by at least 30%.
I've been in this business for a while, and I was still shocked to see how much more powerful than carbon dioxide methane really is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very little known fact. If you do like for like, so over a 100-year period, see if you compare CO2 to CH4, which is methane, methane is 21 times more powerful. When more powerful, that means the global warming potential of methane is 21 times more powerful than CO2 over a 100-year period. Mm-hmm. However, if you look at it from the life span of the methane gas, of the methane molecule, it's actually 84 times more powerful than CO2.
I alluded to this at the start, and I'll do an entire episode just on methane, but it's worth taking a moment to reflect on what Michael is referring to, because he's touching on an issue that's a huge point of contention in the climate community. And climate science deniers like the Koch brothers and their trained monkeys at the Heartland Institute love to distort contentious issues to discredit the entire body of climate science. So let me give you a super simple summary of methane. First, we talk about a carbon footprint, but there are actually 6 major greenhouse gases, and each is a little different. Methane is one of those gases, and in the very short term of a few years, it traps about 100 times more heat than carbon dioxide does. But it also breaks down into carbon dioxide over a period of 10 to 20 years. What this means is that, over a period of 100 years, methane is only 25 times as bad as carbon dioxide, but over 20 years, it's more than 80 times as bad. Let me repeat that because it's a lot to swallow. Over 100 years, methane traps 25 times as much heat as carbon dioxide does. But over 20 years, it traps more than 80 times as much heat. Now, scientists managed to simplify the mess, albeit imperfectly, by coming up with something called CO2e, which stands for carbon dioxide equivalent, and acts as a standardized measurement of greenhouse gases. It works by first determining how many times worse than carbon dioxide a given greenhouse gas is over the next century, and using that as the multiplier. For example, because methane is 25 times worse than carbon dioxide over 100 years, its multiplier is 25. So, if you look at the most recent State of Voluntary Carbon Markets report, which we examined in episode 14, you'll see a reference to landfill methane. That's because landfills are kind of like giant man-made cow stomachs, and all that stuff in there ferments. Methane is the result. Now dive into that report, and you'll find that last year, Ecosystem Marketplace tracked voluntary carbon transactions that captured enough methane to prevent 4.6 million tons of CO2e from escaping into the atmosphere. But remember, CO2e is the carbon dioxide equivalent over 100 years. And over 100 years, methane is 25 times worse than carbon dioxide. So, that 4.6 million tons of CO2e is really less than 200,000 tons of methane, about 184,000 tons to be exact. With me so far? Here's the controversy. Rising temperatures will force our natural systems to release more and more methane. And if we warm the Earth more than 2 degrees Celsius, all of the climate models go crazy. No one really knows what happens after that, but it isn't good. Michael will get into this shortly, but I wanted to explain it here as well. More and more scientists and environmental NGOs argue that the multiplier should be more like 80, because the next 20 years are so important. By that measure, the 184,000 tons of methane that Ecosystem Marketplace tracked last year is really more like 14.7 million tons of carbon dioxide.
So methane is extremely much more warming potential than CO2, and that's why it's important that, well, A, more people know about it, and that B, we are able to tackle it immediately, because it would really help the world meet its target of a world under 2 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and by the life cycle or the lifetime, that's about 20 years, I think, right?
Yes, that's correct. So methane lasts about 20 years, whereas CO2 lasts 100 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, in essence, when you discuss about the goals, and I think you've seen the clock that's at the entrance that says it's the carbon counter.
No, I walked right past that.
Yeah,
and
you
didn't see it.
should check it out. But basically, it lets us know that we only have 16 years left
Uh-huh.
of our carbon budget.
Let me pop in again. The carbon budget he is referring to is the maximum amount of greenhouse gas that can be released into the atmosphere before we hit the 2-degree limit. Climate science deniers love to point out that there's some disagreement over this number, which there is, but it's mostly a question of decimal points, of how much rather than if. We'll soon be doing a whole episode just on the carbon budget as well.
So it makes no sense to talk about a gas that lasts 100 years when we only have 16 years to fix things. So that's why it's an even more important issue to try to tackle methane in the next 16 years.
Yeah, that's something we get into a lot with the whole issue of carbon neutrality, because if you're offsetting methane emissions with a CO2 reduction and the standard is based on the 100-year cycle, you're really not offsetting, because in the short term you're creating so much more.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. And that's why it is important also to do a carbon offset like for like. So it should be a methane offset if you are releasing methane, such as the gas companies or the big energy companies that do that.
Mm-hmm. Going back to your company, how exactly does this product work, this Mootral?
The natural feed supplement is actually made up of 2 key natural ingredients. Those are garlic extracts from garlic, and extract from orange peel. And our very talented biotech scientists are able to extract those specific compounds and make a powder. And that powder, then we basically put that powder into the feed of the cow, and then we just give the feed to that cow.
Mm-hmm. Quick note, there are other products that aim to reduce the methane from cows, including one called 3-nitrooxypropanol, or 3-NOP. Mootral is made from natural ingredients, but I can't really say which is better. Now, you're a vegetarian, right?
Yes, I'm actually a pescatarian, but I
Okay.
only eat fish once a week.
Uh-huh. I mean, shouldn't we just get rid of cows entirely then?
No, we don't condone the fact that people eat meat every day. That's not what I'm here for, and that's not what I preach. What I know is that there is a big problem that the livestock industry poses, and we have a solution to help reduce those emissions from those cows. As you probably know, the livestock industry in a lot of countries is a big part of not just their economy, but their culture and their society. And so cows in general, actually, you know that there are 1.5 billion cows on Earth. Cows will continue to be here on Earth. So that problem needs to be addressed, and that we have that solution to help not just the cow become happier and healthier, but also help the farmers themselves with a solution so that they can not just reduce the emissions, but also earn more money through Mootral.
Okay. The emissions come from, they're burping and farting, I guess, for lack of a better word, and also from the manure.
Yes. So a cow actually, if you look at you look at the upstream and the downstream emissions. So you're absolutely correct. But just to put it in perspective, the majority of the methane production of the cow is through its belching. So when it belches, it actually emits about 90%, of its emissions, and that's where most of the methane comes out of its mouth. The actual flatulence is a bit of a myth because actually it flatulates about 5%, 5 to 10% of its time. The majority of it comes actually just out of its mouth.
That's interesting. I've actually written articles that have to be corrected then, because I always thought it came out the other
but that's the
end.
thing. But I think it makes it more readable and it's more catchy if you say, a cow farts than just a cow burp. And by the way, you never hear a cow burp, and that's also why people don't realize that. You never hear when a cow is in the field or is in the farm that it actually burps every minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you heard it every minute, then you would probably do something about it.
There's also these devices, they were talking about distributing them in parts of Latin America that were kind of like fart catchers. Have you heard of those? Have you heard of that?
Yes, there was this crazy idea actually of I think it was in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, where they were trying to put a device up the up the cow's bottom to catch the gas, when actually most of the gas comes out of its mouth. And so, as you probably can imagine, if you did put such a device around the head, it would just suffocate.
Right.
So that's why it's both funny and just purely
sad.
Impractical and sad.
But also if you just capture methane in a barn, aren't you capturing the burps as well, or is that?
No, that's just to capture the manure. There isn't a device or a farm where we're able to capture the methane from the burps of the cows.
Wow. Okay.
And I think this. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen such a device or such an infrastructure, but I would imagine that if there was one, it would just be too dangerous, because there would be so much methane in the room that, just a spark would just probably just light everything up.
Yeah. Can we just feed cows garlic and orange peels?
No, we can't. That's a very, very good question. But unfortunately, it's actually the specific compounds in the garlic and the specific compounds in the orange peel that have this effect on the bacteria inside the cow. So, no, of course, a cow could eat, garlic and oranges, but it wouldn't have that same effect as those specific compounds that are extracted and then dosaged in the right way and formulated in the right way, so that it attacks specifically those bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How much would it cost per cow to administer this treatment?
Yeah, so basically, the price that we envisage, because right now we're not at scale, we're really just, in launching mode. But we envisaged that when we are at scale, that the price would be about $50 per cow per year. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, if you translate it for a farmer, it's about pennies a day.
Mm-hmm. And I can see that being a marginal cost in, say, the United States, but in, say, Kenya, where you have these farmers are barely getting by, they won't be able to afford that.
No, you're partly right. So we have a few mechanisms or a few ideas of how to approach the emerging markets. We're, for example, talking with the World Bank at the moment to figure out, how can we work together to implement, our technology in those countries, because, as you rightly say, so they can't afford it. So they have some ideas, we have some ideas. It revolves around potentially doing a carbon offset scheme with a developed country.
That's the second time he's mentioned offsetting, which is when you reduce your carbon footprint by reducing emissions someplace else. For a deeper dive into offsetting, check out episode 14. Mm-hmm.
Or also potentially doing bilateral agreements between emerging countries, because as you probably know, the trading between China and Brazil ships a lot of beef to China, and China ships other things. So in that bilateral trade agreement, there could be a way of funding the carbon neutrality of the beef that is imported into China.
Right. Okay. Now, you're for profit as well. This is not a charitable venture.
No, we're certainly not an NGO and not for profit. We're 100% commercial enterprise. We're a private company that is based in Switzerland, near Geneva. We believe that to really solve this problem of livestock emissions, we have to do it in a commercial way. Otherwise, it would make no sense, and this is no pun intended, no sense for the farmers, because the farmers at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know if you know any farmers, but they're very, very pragmatic.
Yeah.
They understand about livestock, and they understand about yield. They understand about the quality and the quantity of their product. And if somebody comes up and tells them, you have to do this and you have to do that, and they cannot earn more money or it makes no commercial sense, then I'm sorry, but they won't do it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why it's important for us to propose a commercial solution to solving this issue that they have.
Yeah, I did a piece earlier about farmers in Kenya. We did an episode of Bionic Planet on that. I forget which one it was. I think it was number 8, but I'd have to double check that. I double checked, and it's episode 7. It was interesting to see how much productivity they got out of 4 acres by aggressively managing the land and applying agroforestry. And then their big aim was to do that and then go buy a cow. And one of the interesting things that came out of that was that Dannon and the Livelihoods Fund are helping to finance them. And one of the ways they're hoping to do that is by earning carbon offsets for methane efficiency, because by improving the nutrition that they're giving the cows, they'll get more milk per liter or per whatever the unit of measurement of methane is. I thought that was interesting. And I could see how this could fit into something like that as well.
You're absolutely right. It's all about the productivity of the cow and the high yield that you're getting out from the cow. And that's one of the attributes actually of Mootral is actually, in essence, it actually helps the cow digest. That's what it does, because it kills the bad bacteria that makes it not digest properly. So when it does that, it actually has more energy to spend on producing what it needs to produce.
It means the cow. And the interesting thing is that by taking away the so-called bad bacteria that make it burp, Mootral lets the cow use its energy for other things, like making milk. Incidentally, I had food poisoning while in Barcelona, and I gobbled some Mootral and felt great afterwards. That's not a scientific study, and Mathras isn't making human health claims yet, but they are researching it.
So at the moment, we're finishing trials to measure that and to quantify that, but our literature and our scientific evidence suggests that the productivity of the cow is higher when it eats Mootral, because it digests better.
Wow, okay. So there might even be more methane efficiency in addition to...
That's correct. So actually we're looking into, not just the quality of the milk and the quality of the meat, but also in the quantities to figure out, how much more products the farmer will get out of the cow.
So it could have better quality in terms of better taste, better flavor, or is that too speculative? I don't know. I don't want.
So no, it's a good question. In terms of the milk, the evidence that we are gathering right now suggests that the milk is actually creamier. There's more fatty acids and more protein than without Mootral, simply because, once again, the cow is a bit healthier and it helps it digest, so therefore it has more energy that it can spend on producing the good nutrients that it needs to produce in its milk. And in terms of the meat, no, there's no additional flavoring. It's just that
it doesn't come with a garlic flavor.
No, it doesn't come with a garlic flavor. But actually, there's a video that's running right now where we did a beef tasting in Italy for the Italian media. And we basically fed Mootral to some Charolais cows, which is a very, very high quality cow. And we made it cooked by a chef. and the chef cooked it, and she actually thought that the quality was very, very good. There was nothing wrong with the meat, and the taste was good, the texture was good, everything was positive about it.
Okay. Now, you've got these charts on the wall here.
Yes.
Which look pretty interesting, and it looks like it's your business case lined up, right?
That's correct.
Can we
yeah.
maybe do a walkthrough on these? I
Yeah,
don't know if we
absolutely.
should walk along, or...
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start at the... This is like a flow chart you've got here, and it
Yes,
starts out...
that's
Now
correct.
I see... Okay, so you start out, you've got a little garlic clove and an orange.
Yeah, so right. So the first panel is what we call just the livestock supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start with our ingredients, which are the two natural ingredients that we use, which are the garlic extract and the orange peel extract. Then we make the powder. The scientists make our powder, and then the powder is given to the feed mill, and then the feed mill, of course, give it to the farmers. The farmers feed it to its cows, and then that's where the methane reduction happens, well, at least 30%. And then, of course, the farmer sells the premium product, because it is at the end of the day a premium product, to the supermarkets or to the retailers or to the producers.
And you've got to hear climate smart beef and dairy, so that'll be the part of the
This is a
brand.
concept that we've created, and that's one of the market mechanisms that we want to introduce. It's called climate smart beef, which basically means that the beef, or actually also the climate smart dairy products, are carbon friendly. So it's very much in line with the organic standard, that it's more environmentally friendly. And so then, of course, the retailer can use that climate smart label to basically sell that premium product to the consumers. And then, of course, the consumers understand that they've purchased a climate smart product from a cow, so therefore supporting the farmers and making sure that money goes to the farmer itself.
Okay, and it looks like you've got feedback loops in here as well.
That's correct. So this is just to showcase where the value creation, the money created is created. So the additional revenue from the premium product is given obviously to the retailer or to the producer. And then, of course, that money is provided to the farmer. And then, of course, the farmer demands the Mootral and provides the revenue to the feed mill.
Right.
And then, of course, the feed mill gives us the money so that we are able to produce Mootral.
Okay, and you mentioned carbon offsets earlier.
That's correct. So that's in the second panel.
Okay.
So this is the second panel. So we have a new concept that we call the cow credit.
Okay.
So the cow credit is a new high-quality carbon offset that we want to introduce, probably not this year, but in the coming years, depending on which route we take. We, of course, want to introduce it first on the voluntary markets, because that will be easier, and then go into maybe the regulated markets later on.
Another bit of clarification. There are two types of carbon markets. Compliance markets, also known as cap and trade, where a government puts a cap on overall emissions and lets companies trade their emission reductions to funnel money into the most efficient technologies. And then voluntary markets, where companies or people buy offsets because it's the right thing to do, not because they're obligated to.
But basically, there's two ways that we see that we could potentially introduce the cow credit. So a consumer can basically go through two routes. One is through what we call a cow funding platform. So it's a play
like
on the word
crowdfunding, yeah.
Crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm.
So the cow funding basically allows the consumer to purchase a cow credit from a particular farm. So on that cow funding platform, you'll have your local farmer, and then you'll be able to purchase the cow credit specifically from that local farm. So then that money goes directly to that farm, and you can see that farm online. And then the second way is you just buy a carbon offset through either a business, or through, for example, your airline flight that you want to offset, and then that business or that airline just buys just provides the the money to the farmer, and then the cal credit is issued. So those are the two ways that we envisage the cal credit to be produced.
Are you talking to any of the carbon standards?
Yeah, absolutely. We're right now. That's one of the reasons why we are here, is to discuss with the various standards, but also consultancies and financiers, of figuring out what's the most efficient, and effective way of producing this new carbon offsets scheme.
Mm-hmm. My colleague Kelly had mentioned that you were in the process of setting something up in California, right? Is that
so? Exactly. So our objective this year is to conduct pilot projects. So a pilot project is very simple. One is to just re-verify, that everything is fine in terms of the effects and the scientific evidence within that territory, because all the pilot projects, all the trials, all the scientific trials that we've conducted so far have been in Europe. And then secondly, it's to activate those two market mechanisms that I've just discussed. First of all, introduce the climate smart label or standard in that particular country, and also introduce the cal credit into that country, and understand what are the economic mechanisms that apply in that particular market, and to see that everything works well, and that the money flows in the right way, and that everything is transparent, and everything is works that in the way that it should work.
I can see how this would work, how the carbon offsets would work in, say, developing countries, because of the additionality component, meaning that you have to show that the carbon offset actually made the emission reduction possible. Let me expand on this a bit, because additionality is another one of those funky concepts that we'll have to build a whole episode around shortly. In a nutshell, additionality means you can't call something an offset unless you can show that the payment made the emission reduction possible. If you build a solar installation today, for example, the economics are such that it's probably going to generate cheap electricity that beats coal, so you can't use carbon finance to build it. But that wasn't always the case. Just a few short years ago, you needed carbon finance and/or government subsidies to get renewable energy projects off the ground. Likewise, in the case of Mootral, $50 per year isn't much for a U.S. farmer, especially if he gets better milk, but it could be a deal breaker in developing countries, which is where I take it now. I can see why that would be a valid argument in Kenya. Do you see that as an issue in the U.S., or is it, or do you see the cost as being so marginal that maybe that the additional marketing could make up for that? Or
so there's one specific element that we didn't discuss, and the reason is that we don't have those numbers yet, and that's the economic, the higher yield that you get. It may be that the economic case, which is that one, just justifies in itself the purchase of Mootral. So what I mean is that when the farmer feeds Mootral to its cows, it produces more milk or more protein, more beef, and therefore the production of that yield, when it sells it to the producer or retailer, offsets the cost of Mootral. So if that is the case, then the cal credit is actually just an additional revenue. It's a bonus for the farmers.
But it's not an offset, which means you can't claim to have reduced your own emissions even if you did some good. Again, additionality is a complex issue, and one we'll be diving into in more detail and hopefully more clarity later on.
Our ideal scenario is that will be the case, that Mootral will actually just be a really, really nice feed supplement that the people, that the farmers will be able to purchase, and that it will help it with producing more meat or more milk. And the cal credit will actually just be an additional revenue for the farmers. And so we could imagine that if that's the case, then in emerging countries, that would be a fantastic opportunity for those farmers to get more revenues for themselves.
Would that be enough to overcome that? Or I really don't like this idea of absolute additionality, because I think anything that makes these changes happen more quickly is worthwhile, but that is a concern.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but the bottom line, and I think that's where you're getting at, is that at the moment, there aren't any solutions to reduce, emissions from enteric fermentation, methane that happens from the cow. So we're really just introducing something new into the market, and if we didn't exist, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So unless there's a new solution that comes on the market right now and it's given to everybody, to all the cows and to all the farmers around the world, our solution is really just a brand new one, and therefore the additionality issue is really just a relative one.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Anything you wanted to add, or do you think we've covered everything?
Well, I think I just want to, go back to this one, because our philosophy, and it's not really written here, but there's a specific play on word that we like to talk about, and that's the win-win-win-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we like to say that, because actually we are trying to create a win-win-win-win situation. We are creating a win situation for the farmer, because they're going to earn more money, a win situation for the retailers, because they're going to also provide a premium product to the consumers. We're creating a win situation for the consumers, because they have a better option to purchase beef or dairy, while at the same time, making sure that they're helping to reduce the methane emissions around the world. And then, of course, there's a win for the governments, because then they're able to meet their national plans, because a lot of those governments, and some of them are here today, have a big livestock industry, and they, that livestock industry is a big part of their carbon budget, and therefore they need to provide a solution for it to reduce and meet their targets. California is a perfect example. 40% methane reduction targets by 2030. Those are massive numbers, and fortunately or unfortunately, the livestock industry is the majority part responsible for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks. That's a good place to end it, I think. That helps a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Michael Mathras of Mootral, wrapping up this edition of Bionic Planet. And if you want to learn more about Mootral and methane, Kelly Hamrick of Ecosystem Marketplace will be helping me to incorporate parts of this episode into an article on Ecosystem Marketplace, hopefully next week. We'll add that story to the show notes for this episode 15, at bionic-planet.com. But check it out on Ecosystem Marketplace as well. We've got another episode coming up in a few days, this time featuring Bertrand Piccard, the first man to fly around the world in a solar-powered plane. Now he's looking to get 1,000 profitable clean climate solutions off the ground by the end of next year. Finally, if you like what you've heard so far, be sure to let others know and give us a good review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you access podcasts. You can also become a patron on bionic-planet.com. If enough of you help me out with just $1 an episode, I can take the time to do these right. Every time I listen to one, I hear something I want to do over. Something where I talked too fast, or had my mouth too close to the microphone, or just didn't make the sense that I wanted to. But doing them over takes time. Doing them once takes time. And a good sound man. And a team of people who can be a second set of ears before I hit the upload button. Your support can make that possible. But that's all for today. Until next time, I'm Steve Zwick in Chicago, saying thanks for listening.